this month with things being what they are, it would be easier to move it off of a holiday week. So glad folks could join us. And just would invite folks who are not ASSP members to consider joining. But for today's topic, we have Leigh Manning, who will be our speaker. Leigh has been a safety consultant with SAIF Corporation for many years, and in doing consulting, and has talked a lot about leadership and supervision for supervisors. And so she brings a tremendous amount of experience to the group. She also more recently has been developing a lot of different resources for SAIF. And is really tuned into a number of resources that other organizations have also developed. And so she'll be talking about that today. But before I turn it over to Leigh, Christy, did you have anything else that you wanted to jump in about before we hand it over to Leigh?
Only that one, we're recording the presentation, so we'll make it available afterwards on the ASSP Cascade chapter website for anybody who misses it. And also we're working on a presentation for January around reasonable suspicion. So you'll get an update to that when we firm up the program. And I think that's it for me. I'll keep admitting people into the meeting as they join, and try to help keep an eye on the chat for Leigh.
And the only other announcement I would just kind of remind folks of that we've mentioned in the past is coming up in March will be our conference. And so we've got a number of exciting speakers coming to talk at our conference. Robin Rose will be our keynote speaker. And to me, especially given the challenges for many safety professionals, I know at least for myself, with just kind of mental health and resilience during the challenges of the pandemic and kind of the increased workload, a lot, I think, of Robin's messages as a keynote speaker will be well received. I've heard her speak before, and I'm super excited to have her be speaking. And then got a lot of other good speakers as well for March. I believe the dates are 7th and 8th, but at the beginning of March. So if you don't already have that on your calendar, encourage you to do that. And you can look at our chapter website for some information, and there'll be more information coming out with the program guide and the different speakers and topics and all that should come out soon. We hope to have that finalized here shortly, but you can at least put the dates in the calendar. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Leigh. Thank you again, Leigh, for being willing to speak today on such an important topic.
Oh, and it looks like Christy put a link to your Cascade conference in chat as well. So awesome. Another place for people to get information. And she's also put a link to the handout that goes with this presentation. And it's really nice because Christy is going to be sharing the slides on the website so that you have access to the links that are in there. But everything that I'm going to be discussing, this is kind of like the handout. So if you want to grab that handout, that is going to be basically in a nutshell the stuff I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to share a screen, and Christy's going to interrupt me if there are any questions or any needs that come up, because sometimes I can't see people when I'm presenting, right? So, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with that, and I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation. So today we are going to talk about supportive supervision, which I hope I've got the right.
It looks like you're in presenter mode, so we can see your slide in the next one. That
okay, yes, perfect. Okay, I was like, what the heck happened here? Okay, good. Yes, I can't see anyone. All right. So we're going to talk about supportive supervision today. Now, this is actually a model that is from Dr. Leslie Hammer. She's up at Portland State. And a lot of this work was done kind of in conjunction with the Oregon Healthy Workforce Center, which is a NIOSH Center of Excellence up at OHSU. And is somebody not muted? Or, okay, we're all good. All right, so I want to give credit to her, and we're going to talk about some of the research that she's done around this topic, and she's also put together some resources for people to be able to do it. So without further ado, we're going to talk a little bit about what it is, why you should care about it, so the benefits of it. And we're going to go through the two different sides of it, the models, so that you kind of get an idea. I'm going to provide a couple success stories, and then at the end, you're going to get some resources and tools. And the thing that's really exciting to me is all these resources and tools are absolutely free, and it doesn't matter if you're a SAIF policy holder or not. All of them are out there on the website, and I look forward to the end because I do know that Jim Nusser and Naomi Hernandez have used these a lot of these resources, and I'll look forward to hearing what they have to say about them. And we also have a number of Spanish translations that Naomi has used, so that's really exciting about these materials. So first, what is supportive supervision? Well, it's basically that perception that your supervisor values your contributions and cares about your personal and professional needs and well-being. And this is a really important thing. And you'll notice that it's the perception. So it's my belief that you care about these things. Well, that's an important thing, it turns out, because perception is reality for people. So as a supervisor, that's one of those things that you have to look at. So how can I make people feel that I am offering them the help and support, assistance, guidance, all those wonderful things that they need? Well, that's what supportive supervision is all about. So why is it necessary? Well, we all know that there's pressure from both work and family, and that's really what supportive supervision at kind of at the end of the day recognizes that they can affect one another. So if you're having problems at work, it can spill over into home. And if you're having problems at home, it can spill over into work. That is at the root of what total worker health, the model that NIOSH came up with, is all about as well. So that's a really important thing to acknowledge as a supervisor. And those, if you're not acknowledging that, and if people are not taking care of those things when they come up, it increases stress on in both sides, and it can cause negative issues at work and at home, both. So that's why it's a really necessary way to lead people by using supportive supervision tactics. So what's the benefit? Well, first of all, it really gives supervisors all of these wonderful resources and strategies to help employees, both at work and at home. And the cool thing is when this is in full force, and we have supervisors that are actually applying these concepts and really walking the talk, as it were, we've seen a positive impact on the turnover for employees. It actually improves the sleep for employees, and improvements in physical and mental and emotional health, as well as improving relationships. And not just even at home, also at work. It improves everything. The whole well-being package is improved when you have good supervision. And that isn't probably surprising to a lot of people to hear, but it really points to the need for supervisors, and especially those in leadership roles, to put the time in to see what they can do to assist the employees. So I'm going to go ahead and kick off to the two different models that are covered in supportive supervision. Now, the first one is work-life family support. And these are the four different areas, and I'm going to kind of cover each of those four. But these are basically the four things that you want to focus on as a supportive supervisor. So just to kick it off, you have to really understand and demonstrate that you understand that there are demands in both personal and family responsibilities in addition to work. So I remember the old model, and I've heard people say this, I've even talked to employers who've said this, I don't really care what they do. When they're here at work, they're at work. They got to do work. And then, leave their stuff from home at home. Well, you can't really do that. Human beings are really bad at doing that, especially if it's very, very pressing situation that's happening at home. And there's a lot of those things. It's going to spill over into work. And so acknowledging that and knowing that is important. Being able to express that genuinely, and workers really feel like they are being cared for by their supervisor is the next part of that. And not everybody can do that. Sometimes it takes a little bit of practice to communicate that concern. Everybody has different leadership styles, and they have different work styles. We all have different personalities, and supervisors do too. So sometimes this does take a little bit of practice to do. The next part is actually asking for what employees think. And this is a really important thing for employee engagement as well. When we are actually listening to employees and taking into account what they think, and they feel like they're being heard, it's amazing what that does for the overall morale. And it really, really does improve the whole feeling in the workplace. And it improves the whole feeling of well-being for the individual workers. So it's a really, really important thing. And this isn't that hard to do. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. You can do it through surveys and focus groups, but this is something, even walking around and just talking to employees and listening for a little bit is an important thing. I know that we had recently had a survey on what we can do for remote work, because the pandemic has changed a lot of things. So they actually put out a survey and said, we want to hear from you. How is this working for all of you? How do you see your role now? And it was just a really cool thing to be able to express that. So that's one way, but there's a lot of different ways to ask for input. But that's another part of that, of being able to support the employees as a supervisor. Now, the next one, and we talked a little bit about expressing that care for folks. And part of that is being approachable. And you've heard people talk about the whole open door policy, and that can work really well, but it can also not work really well if the person has their door open, but they're giving a lot of nonverbal cues that they're not really available. So that's something to think about as a supervisor. Are you approachable? Because remember, you might be right in the middle of something as a supervisor, but if somebody comes in and one of your employees has a need, it might be something that you might, if it's not really critical, you might have to pivot off of that, because there are some things that are more important than others, and you have to be able to prioritize the employee when needed. And this is why it's also really important to know what kinds of resources are available to employees so that you can refer them to those things if they need them. Now, I believe probably in this group, we're lucky enough to work for a lot of employers that have employee assistance programs. So if you're in supervision or you have a supervisors at your workplace, they should really know what those resources are available to workers, and so that they're able to share them. If you are unfortunately in one of those employers that may not have as much available, if you want to be a really good supervisor and you really want to be a supportive supervisor, finding out what's available in the community is a really important thing too. So then the last part is, now this can be a really important thing. We talk about this in so many of our presentations at SAIF, because when you become a supervisor, you are always being watched. You really are. People are seeing what you're saying and then what you're doing. And the example that we always love to use is that person that maybe there's an area that a certain personal protective equipment is always required, but you're walking in and out of there as a supervisor and you're not putting it on. Well, that conveys a message to the employees regardless of whether, without even saying a word. And so it's really, really important um, to basically do what you say. So if you are conveying a message to your employees, that you should be following the same thing. Um, and in this case, when we're talking about supportive supervision, if you're supporting the workplace in dealing with life problems that may come up outside of work, that means that you're dealing with, as a supervisor, your items that come up outside of work also in a good way. So you might have had a work-life conflict, you may have had something come up. So make sure that as a supervisor, you're also prioritizing your work-life issues, the things that are really important. Um, if something happens at home, man, you should be there. If somebody's in the hospital, you should be there. There's certain things that trump work, and you should be out there when that happens. And this goes for the other thing. If you're modeling your behavior, that maybe that also shows that when we're talking about well-being and you're being a supportive supervisor, that you're not the supervisor that's sending those emails on the weekends or maybe after work hours. That's a really important thing because again, it sends a message without really even saying a word. So you're working, outside of hours. Make use of that feature in most in Outlook, especially where you can go in and time it and have it sent at a different time. That's, I understand that people like to have flexible work as well, but we want to make sure that we let people know that there are certain times and places that, you know, that we should be able to pursue the things that are important to us from the home life so that we can keep that also healthy. Now, the second part of the model is safety support. And this is what's really important for us as safety consultants. And then there's 4 different areas in that as well. So we start out with demonstrating the commitment to safety, and that's sharing your expectations. Now, I like to say that like sharing a vision is really important with this. So having a safety vision and being able to convey it very clearly is really, really important. That has to be clearly communicated to all of your workers. Now, there's a lot of places that I've worked with that might have a great safety policy, but might have one and maybe it's in a binder somewhere. But if people don't know what it is, well, then they're not really going to understand what the expectation is about safety in the workplace. So this is a very important part of supportive supervision. The expectations have to be clear about safety. The second piece of that goes with, and this is in the work life part as well, how important it is for workers to speak up. They should be able to offer any suggestions to improve things, but they should also be able to speak up if there's a worry or a concern. That goes back to the level of comfort of being able to come to management and share things that they're worried about. That's a very critical part of safety and making sure that you have an effective safety program. Now, there is a section here where it talks about creative solutions. I'm going to talk about the leadership series a little bit later, which is a bunch of free resources that anybody can have, whether they're with SAIF or not. I don't care. It's out there free on saif.com. Going to give you the address later. Anybody can access any of those. There is Learning Teams is a tool that you can use to engage workers and generate creative solutions. It is amazing to me the cool stuff that comes up when employees are actually engaged in the process, not just of safety, but in the workplace as a whole, because they are the ones who are doing the work and they are the ones who are living it day by day. And they can come up with such wonderful, just absolutely magnificent suggestions. And so that will be as part of the resources, and you're welcome to take a look at that, see if that might be something you might want to pursue as you look to become a supportive supervisor. So the next thing is making sure that whatever is done can be done safely. So the actions that you take as a supervisor, you want to make sure that they have enough hours to complete whatever it is, that they're working, an appropriate level shift. There's plenty of research that says if people work too long, that they are putting themselves at risk for injury. That's something to know as a supportive supervisor. And also not just that, but addressing things when they come up. So if there is an unsafe condition, that you make sure and get that repaired or addressed in some way, whatever needs to be done. Now, we talk a lot about unsafe behaviors and safety and health, and that is something that we do talk about. But we in the materials that we have, we talk a lot about how people don't get up in the morning and say, well, I'm going to work unsafely today. They usually don't. For the most part, people make these choices to work unsafely for a lot of different reasons. And it might be things like production targets that they have to hit. So they're trying to take some shortcuts to get it done. Or it might be that something is broken and they're doing a workaround. But that's usually why people are engaging in unsafe behaviors. So digging down deep into that and trying to help solve that is a really big part of supportive supervision. Okay, training is the last piece, and it's a really important piece because we've set the expectations in the first step. We have our nice safety policy and all that set out, but now we've got to train them on how to do it, and that's really, really important. There's a lot of places where training um, is not a high priority. And I hear reports back of people that are kind of thrown in because they're needed right away, and they don't take the time to kind of instruct and show people how to do things. Well, that's not uh, what a supportive supervisor would do, taking the time to make sure that workers understand how to do things safely, and not just when they first get hired or when we start a new task, but also like a regular refresher training is really, really important because it kind of hits the reset button with folks, and gives them reminders of how they're supposed to be actually doing the work, because creep does come in. Uh, Bad practices do come in, but getting the reset and making sure that everybody knows, yep, this is how we're going to do it. Also, instructing folks on how to find and recognize when things are not safe is an important part of this as well. All of this goes with the safety support model of supportive supervision. So now I'm going to move into a success story, and Christy will probably like this one. I'm going to talk about SHIP. And SHIP is the Safety and Health Improvement Program. That's the program that Dr. Leslie Hammer developed with the folks up at OHSU and the Oregon Healthy Workforce Center. And what she did was she created this program for supportive supervision. Um, and it's kind of a program. It's training combined with a mechanism for tracking behaviors. Okay. So she took this program and did it at the City of Portland Water Bureau and at PBOT, which is the Portland Bureau of Transportation. And I know Christy will like this one because I think a lot of the same work is very similar to what the City of Eugene Public Works does. So she will know and she'll agree, and she's probably nodding, that this is stressful and demanding work. And there's work-life balance concerns because you're on call. There can be weather events that require longer shifts. There's just a lot of things that are required of these workers that create a need for a supportive supervision model. So what they did was they trained the supervisors, and this was done in live training sessions where Dr. Leslie Hammer and some of her colleagues came out and did actual classes with the supervisors on how to communicate more effectively, how to support work-life balance. And I do have to say that work-life balance, I kind of, that always makes me think that we're kind of like balancing, like it's a seesaw and you're trying to, like there should be both. But I really do believe that there are times when something at home will just take over that, and work shouldn't even be on the radar. But saying that, understanding that those things happen, that's part of the training, and also had to improve team effectiveness. So they did all that, and they did that in live trainings, and they gave them some of these training tools. And here was the outcome. And this was very cool. Now, this is an objective measure. I just love this. Now, they took the baseline blood pressure in the beginning, and then they put in place the training in the program, and they took it afterward, several weeks later, and it was lower. That's a total objective measure, that employees had a certain blood pressure in the beginning and it lowered as a result of supportive supervision. That to me is such a cool story, and it's a cool objective measure that you can point to. Now, the remainings, these all improved as well. This was collected through surveys. So they did a survey in the beginning and then did a survey at the end, so that employees were able to rate how they felt about the health and safety practices, and how they felt about stress and work-life conflict and team effectiveness. And all of that was shown to be higher. So it's great that all of these things got better and resolve themselves much better in this particular pilot. But it can be hard to do live trainings if you want to put out a program. So what OHSU did with Dr. Leslie Hammer is they came up with a computer-based training program, and they used it with the U.S. Forest Service. So here's our second success story. And in it, they learned these behaviors to support employees in an online training, and they were given supportive behaviors tracking sheets so that they were able to do that. And I know that that sounds a little bit weird, but what I always try to tell supervisors is if it's not natural for you to to engage in supportive behavior, it's not really natural for you to do it, then if you have a tracking sheet where you're actually being intentional about doing it and you're paying attention to it and writing it down, then that can actually train the supervisors over time to really exhibit more supportive behaviors. And we talked about some of these supportive behaviors earlier. Okay, so after they did that, here was the outcome. There was significantly lower psychological distress reported, and then fewer concerns over forest safety. And I loved that second one, especially as a safety person. This is like something that, oh, yay, that's great. Because when we really think about safety, um, if a workplace is unsafe, and especially if it's a high hazard workplace and it feels unsafe to us, um, it has ramifications on the well-being of people, and it can really make a difference and have an impact. So anyway, that's why supportive supervision is so important. And can you imagine if you have a hazardous workplace, but you have supportive supervisors, and then people can feel safer because of those supportive behaviors with the safety support and the work-life family support. So SHIP is the program that I talked about that was rolled out, and this is describes the 1 hour online training. And the really cool thing is we actually partnered with them to help them develop this. SAIF did, and it has all this cool stuff in it, and it's really short. It's only an hour long, but we had them break it into 5 different modules, and the longest one is 15 minutes. And we find that there's a lot of employers that don't have a ton of time to put into stuff. And so that's what this is all about, is to give people an opportunity, if they can only grab 10 minutes or 15 minutes here and there, until they get all of the pieces, and then they can download the actual print material so that they have it for reference. Those are all in here as well. And it's just a really cool program. So the links are here. Christy's going to upload this into the website so that you can access this. You can also get this on the leadership series page on saif.com, which I'm going to give you in just a minute. But I wanted to mention this because this is what those success stories were based on, and it teaches supportive supervision. Now, as we talk about supportive supervision, we have a few other tools to give you. This one is near and dear to my heart because as a veteran, there is a special need for veterans, given the trauma that many of them have suffered, especially over the last 20 years or so, which of course was later than my service. I was a peacetime veteran, but I do care a lot about them. She actually took the supportive supervision training and tweaked it specifically for the needs of veterans. And when I say she, I mean Dr. Leslie Hammer. And if you go to this website, it will describe the Veteran Supportive Supervisor Training and provide resources and materials for those workplaces that might have a lot of veterans. So they did the research project, and it really did make a difference. And supportive supervision is really a big deal. And um, suicide is one of those things that's really hard to talk about as supervisors, but when we talk about supportive supervision, that is just, it's such an important thing. Um, we are still losing a lot of veterans to that, and when I talk about that, there are also certain workplaces that have higher levels of suicide. And these are the exact kind of skills, knowing what resources are available and being able to provide them, and also being able to support people when things are going on at home. Those all things are so critical to helping people work their way through life's bumps that can be so difficult to navigate. So anyway, that's an important thing, and I wanted to share that part. Now, the SAIF Leadership Series is near and dear to my heart. Jim talked about it in the beginning. I did lead the team that developed this. So there was a whole team that worked on a bunch of leadership materials, and I'm really excited about it. We have a whole page on saif.com, which I'm going to tell you about in a minute. But we developed it with micro learning in mind, because we know that people don't have a lot of time. And so they're short little snippets and pieces for you to be able to cover, which is like most people are like, yay, that's a God said. We love that. It's short little things. But not just that, but it's got adult learning theory in mind as well, so that you're able to actually engage with the materials, because we have handouts in there, which the supportive supervision handout that Christy shared in the chat is one example of the SAIF Leadership Series handouts. We have several of them, and they're designed to engage with them. So it talks about a concept, and we've got a bunch of them. Here's a list of them here that I feel align really well with supportive supervision. Relationship building, vision, like how to create a safety vision, managing change, all of these things go with supportive supervision, and each of them kind of drill down, and not only that, but it describes it, it gives examples. And then at the very end of each, there's a way to engage, like there's suggested activities that you can do to engage with the material of the topic, which I think is a really cool way for people to learn those. So those are the handouts, but we also have e-learning modules, which are really fun things you can do online. We've got activities, there's a work style survey, there's a leadership style survey. There's a bunch of activities in there for people to use that are all around leadership and developing leadership, and it's all out there free for anybody. So here's an example of one, and it's on relationship building. This is a handout. It's an infographic that we have under the relationship building topic. There's so many ways you could use this. You can print it out, and you can hang it on the wall, where supervisors are, to maybe remind them, hey, this is what we want to be, this is what we want to do. Or we might, you can take it to supervisor meetings and have discussions. There's all of these things that you can do with it. So that's an example of one, but we have all kinds of tools on there and all kinds of handouts with a bunch of different topics. So this is where you find it. It's the leadership series on saif.com. Everything's free. It's all out there for anybody. And the quick link is saif.com/learn-to-lead. And you will also find links to the SHIP training that I had earlier in this on that as well. So that is almost it for me. This is the link to the supportive supervision handout that Christy also shared in the chat. And as you can see, it's the same model that we went over in this presentation. So you can just print out this handout and you can share it with people or whatever you'd like to do. So that is the end of my presentation. And I'm going to stop sharing and then open it up to any questions that there might be. And there may not be any.
I don't see any in the chat, but I also tried to keep up with you as you went along, and I added links to the leadership series, the servestudy.org, and so hopefully I caught all those. But if not, I will also send them out with the after materials to those who are on our distribution lists.
Okay, well, the big news here is free materials and fun stuff that you can take back to all of your businesses. And I'm very excited about the number of people that are here today. So I'm hoping that all of you can use these free materials. So I'm just going to say, Christy, that I did such a good job of presenting that there aren't any questions.
Well, you know me, I like to hear stories. I'm sure there's a question somebody or a story somebody wants to tell. And so I'm looking for
Well,
somebody to
maybe
be the
Jim and
one.
yeah, maybe Jim and Naomi can talk about it, can talk about their use of the materials, and then maybe it might get some people thinking about how much they might use this, and if they have any other questions about any of the pilots or anything.
I think, Naomi, I'll let you get started with that if you want. But while you're talking, the other piece that I would love to hear from people, if you all are willing to share, I really liked, Leigh, what you had to mention as far as being intentional. I like the idea of the one resource from SHIP that can kind of remind people to be intentional. And I guess I'm just curious if one or more people would be willing to be vulnerable and share when you think about yourself and supportive supervision, or if you're not a supervisor but you're the safety professional at your organization, you think about your other team members at your organization. What's something that you're currently doing really well as far as being a supportive supervisor? I'd be curious if somebody would be willing to share that, and maybe also share what aspect of supportive supervision are you working on? And I think particularly what I was thinking about, those kind of the 8 pieces that you were talking about, Leigh, at the beginning from SHIP, with kind of those 2 aspects related to the safety as well as the kind of the work-life balance. Be curious if somebody would be willing to share, where are you doing well, and where are you currently working on? But maybe before we see if there will be people who would be willing to jump in with that vulnerability, see, Naomi, would you like to chime in with kind of how you've used some of the resources in the past?
Definitely, Jim. Hold on here. I'm trying to deal with my technology. Yes, definitely. For me, especially, I've been very thankful that SAIF has taken the steps to translate all of the material, because the majority of the workforces that I'm working with in Lane County that have tenure supervisors, I'm talking about even a decade in as supervisors, have never received formal training as supervisors. So I've kind of been piloting myself steps to kind of do one-on-one coaching with them. So we do use all of the materials for the leadership series, and I am working on having a series for Spanish speakers myself. But I work directly with the accounts that normally they have somebody on site that's fully bilingual. And so they've taken some of the modules themselves, and then we just partner together to kind of do that one-on-one instruction coaching with a handful of them. So we do smaller groups because the modules are not translated yet. Leigh, can you clarify, are we planning to translate the modules or just the material, just the document?
Well, my plan is to get it all translated, but it does
Okay.
take a while. And I think that speaks to how robust the materials are, how many there
Yes.
are.
Yes.
And so I would encourage you to go poke around on that site just to see, because there might be a topic there that's like, oh, because we've got emotional intelligence on there. And I spoke about learning teams, which I think for any organization is just an excellent, and there's a lot of resources there on how to create a learning team and how to use it in your business. And I think it's a wonderful way to engage employees. But yes, everything, we're trying to get it all. Yes.
We have a bunch of resources that kind of explain the topic, and then they give you activity ideas. And those have been very beneficial in that small team component. And so, especially when it comes to going back to the Latino workforce, which is who I work with the most, and I've used the program the most, is they're not used to being asked for their opinion. I mean, yes, technically you can say supervisors are constantly asking for their opinion, but they're not used to actually, sitting down and kind of having those discussions. And learning teams is one of those things that really goes into in depth for specific issues that you want to resolve. But that's been a huge success for the demographic that I'm working with. They're very thankful for that training and talk about how they wish they would have been able to have those conversations early on. One of the ones that I strongly recommend that's been super successful with the Latino workforce and all workforces that we've used, because we have a few people present here today that have gone through this exercise with Jim and I when we did our leadership series, is the learning your work style. And having that discussion and kind of learning what your teammates' work style is. That's been one of the favorites of the whole series that I've used a lot. So I recommend you to go check it out. Mm-hmm. Anything else that you wanted me to cover, Jim?
Yeah, thank you. We've got a question that Leigh, maybe you can answer first, and then I'd love to see if others in the group would also be willing to share, because from my perspective, I know we've got a lot of kind of group wisdom, but the question for you, Leigh, how do you maintain a feeling of support or having an open door with remote workers? Is it harder? It is harder to judge physical cues in a remote environment. Any tips on how to be supportive remotely? And so, Leigh, do you want to start with that? And then I'll encourage others to also chime in, because with the group wisdom.
Yeah, and hopefully people will come up with, and there might even be some better ideas, because this is a super huge challenge. And I've actually heard several supervisors tell me how difficult it is. There are some strategies, but because everybody is different and they're individuals, there's always going to be maybe unique challenges with different individuals. One thing that I have seen a lot of supervisors do is to schedule regular one-on-one check-ins, remote check-ins with people, and to have that and just on the calendar. And it's just an expectation that you're going to get together every week or every couple of weeks just to check in and say hello. If you're trying to kind of build relationship remotely, one thing might be to schedule like an informal coffee chat. Where you might even gather a small group of, I don't know, it depends on the size of your team. If you have a really big team, that makes things a little bit more interesting. But if you have a smaller team like mine, that I'm a part of, we get together and we have coffee chats where we have our beverage or whatever, and we just talk. One thing that I think is really important, and this is what's really key to supportive supervision, and it's key to building relationship, and that is that it has to be beyond work. So a lot of things that people will get into because they feel nervous about asking about how people's home life is. But as supervisors, that's really part of the job, is trying to find out how people are doing. How are you doing? Getting to know about them, asking questions about, finding out about their dogs or their kids or those kinds of things. That is all part of being a supportive supervisor. And that is in the relationship building module and also in building trust module, where we talk about those things. Because you might feel like, well, I don't want to pry into their lives. But if you are genuinely showing interest, most people are thrilled to share. And the cool thing is that the more that you do that, that you share back and forth, and the other part is as a supervisor, is revealing a little bit about yourself, especially if you're not that kind of person that has really been open to sharing like that. Making yourself vulnerable by sharing stories about yourself and what's going on in your world can promote other people to share. So that's a little bit of a start. I don't know if that answers your question very well, but I would love to hear what other people have to say.
I thought that was great. Who else would like to share additional thoughts or perspectives on that? Feel free to just unmute and start talking.
Okay, you know me, I'll always jump in the vulnerable spot and get us started. For me, I think one of the gifts of the pandemic is this opportunity to engage in that way, where having conversations about like, how are you? Like, how really are you? And being able to say, I'm not okay, has opened a doorway that wasn't necessarily open for everybody. And there still can be that reluctance to not feel like you're needy or you're asking for things because you don't want to burden somebody else. But I think it's been an amazing opportunity to connect with people in a different way. My team does things where MS Teams created some things where we do a little bit of mischief. I have a place where we have those coffee chats or those water cooler chats that we wouldn't have, like, here's what happened with my pet or whatever. So we've got a different forum, especially helpful for the introverts in the room who want to tell you but don't want to have to interact with you. So kind of meeting them in that spot as well, so that's been a gift as well.
And Michelle made a good point in chat, asking the staff what they need. And that's excellent point. There's in the supportive supervision model, it talks about that in two places, where how important it is to ask for input from employees. So definitely very, very good information, Michelle.
Who else has a thought that you could either type in the chat or unmute and chime in related to remote workers and kind of helping them back to the question. Anyone else willing to share your 2 cents?
quiet group today. I'll also
It
say
is.
there's a fair amount of people who are still in the workforce who haven't, left the field, that are very much doing more so on the work side or out in unusual environments, that, there can be conflict with that too, that some aren't in the workplace and some have to be because of the nature of their work. And I think, that deserves some recognition as well.
Yes, the essential workers. That's absolutely true. Um, they're very, very important to us. A lot of folks have continued on and have had to report to work every day, and so we've had our offices closed for quite a while. We were open for a short little time this summer, and then closed back down again. And so I've been working from home for quite a while now. Um, and I miss people a lot. I really do, and so I think it does take a little bit of extra effort to engage people to make them feel like a part of a team. And I think creating a space for that is really important. One of the things that we talk about in relationship building is creating a space for people to be social. And I think that I think it's really important to have that, to have a space where people can just communicate about stuff, whatever they're feeling, and not. It doesn't necessarily have to be about work, and that's about being, supportive supervisor. There's been a lot of things going on for a lot of different people, all kinds of challenges, and people come at it from different angles too, and so there's got to be some, big-heartedness, acceptance for people who are experiencing things differently than we are.
So I'll share one other thought. Oh, first to Jason. Jason, you were going to share something, please.
Yes, I think it was a good point there. Talking about people, having been in the workplace, and and then those that have been working remote, and some of the stuff that we've seen a little bit, and some of what I've been reading with a lot of things, I think adds credence to some of the challenges that we will see moving forward, in people not really remembering how to interact. And we've seen some cases with that where people that have been working primarily remote, and now things are shifting and they're having to come back on site, and those one-on-one interactions are uncomfortable for them. And I've actually seen people that have gone into meetings, can we just take this to an online meeting? I'd feel more comfortable there. And I think that's something, as we talk about, this topic of supportive supervision, is being aware of some of that and helping people through that process. When you've done something for so long, it's going to be quite the challenge for some people to feel comfortable, to kind of coming back outside of that bubble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I get that, Jason, because it's different, right? Communicating like this, like if I'm talking to somebody this way, it's completely different in person.
Yeah.
It feels different anyway. I mean, if it isn't, it definitely feels different.
Well, and especially for people that would be introverted like myself, once I get home and I'm stuck home for a year and a half, 2 years, I'm so glad I never had to do it.
Yeah, and Kevin
Okay, yeah.
chimes in the chat. As a supervisor of field crew, the pandemic has really intensified the disconnect between field staff and our planning and management staff. Field staff feel inequity as their job can't be done at home, loss of frequent contact and connections, needing to rebuild bridges. Thank you, Kevin, for that sharing of that.
Yeah, and that's huge, and that is something that that needs to be done. And the grace on both sides, hopefully we'll start to see more of that as people recognize that we are being impacted differently. And that's what I was talking about, kind of the grace of understanding those differences. So, but as a supervisor, Kevin, yeah, you're going to have to help those folks with that, and try to work through those feelings, because as a supportive supervisor, those are all valid feelings, and we have to work through them.
And I don't know for Kevin, for your organization, but I think for some organizations, sometimes the folks in the office staff don't necessarily quite understand, how some of the field staff are feeling. And so sometimes part of the challenge is helping them to understand, hey, you might not feel disconnected, but they're feeling disconnected. And
yeah.
Do you want to chime in and share some more, Kevin?
Well, just, I think that's it in a nutshell is, I think both struggle to understand the perspective of the other. I think the folks that are working from home oftentimes forget that not everybody can do that to do their job. And while it comes with challenges to work from home, because I've actually done both. I've done some from home, a lot more in the office though, because as a field crew supervisor, I need to be present. They need to see me. Certain realities, there. But I think that also field staff struggle with, to them it's a fairness thing. Why does one group get to work from home? Because anytime someone else gets to do something that you're not doing, sometimes it feels like that's better or an advantage until you try it. but so there's all those things, and then we've had a lot of just open conversations on my team to kind of talk about the feelings and kind of see a little bit from the other side where we can, and understand too that we kind of got thrust into this thing and we're making the best of it. And, we may not do it perfectly, because I think my team, had some thoughts about, okay, I think it was within our organization too. Why when things got better, why didn't some of these people come back to work? And, I actually shared, that from my perspective, there's advantages to both. There's advantages to some of the meetings I go to where if I don't have to drive somewhere to attend an hour meeting, that I can do it from my office. I can be a lot more efficient, a lot more available to my team. Or if they can join a meeting in the cab of their truck for an hour or half hour, it beats putting everything away and driving in. I think we're just, trying to figure it out. To me, a lot of the struggles or the perceived downsides really come from where society just is right now. We're just way too divisive on all issues. We're burnt out on wearing masks and being told what to do. I mean, that's the part we just got to say, okay, we got to just kind of deal and, get past some of those feelings and make it work for everybody.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate those thoughts. And to me, a number of things that you said really resonated. One of, acknowledging to everybody, hey, we're not going to do this perfect. And in essence, kind of asking for grace amongst everyone. And I love what you can do in your role that I think you're already doing for those that may not see it from both sides because they don't have the experience that you do of seeing both, of helping the folks that are in the office all the time understand, hey, here's how things are coming across. Here's some things, to be aware of what you'll do differently to be more open. And then for the others to say, hey, I get that you might want to see them here, but this is actually helping our organization be more effective by them not having to drive. I think that to me really resonated. The other piece that I wanted to add just briefly to the kind of the original question of one of the things that when I'm working remotely that I do try to do to kind of keep that both support, but also specifically to that comment on the open door policy, I try to be a little conscious of my schedule when I'm having, because in our organization, it's easy for people to pull up other people's schedules. I try not to put everything on the calendar. So I'll try to, some of the times when I'm going to be working on projects, I won't necessarily put it on the calendar so that if somebody's pulling up my calendar, they don't look at it and go, oh, I can't talk to him because he's in meetings all day long. And so it's not that I'm not doing anything, but it's like I'll intentionally leave some spots blank so that if somebody wants to try to call me, it looks like I'm a little more available. The other piece that I do sometimes do is try to share some materials that try to make it clear that I'm open to talking about kind of the issues and kind of work-life balance, emotional, how are people doing? I'll include one that a colleague shared with me recently from NPR on kind of getting stuck in the kind of in a funk during COVID, and how to, tips on breaking out. And so sometimes I'll think about just, hey, share that with members that are on my team, and acknowledge, hey, this resonated with me. At times I feel like I'm in a bit of a funk, and on some level, just making efforts to try to make it okay, to acknowledge and talk about that is another way that I feel like during the pandemic, I'm trying to apply some of the concepts that Leigh was talking about with regards to supportive supervision. Other thoughts or other tips that people have on supportive supervision, that from your perspective, because I know we got a lot of wisdom in the collective group. We've got a few more minutes, so if there's anyone else that wants to share some tips that they have that Leigh hasn't talked about or others haven't contributed, encourage you to share it. Or if there's any other pressing questions, and I do see one other comment. It's also about being able to have the hard, respectful conversations about differences in job duties that allow flexibility to work remotely. Yeah, I think that transparency and willing to just talk about that head on is also super helpful.
Well, and 2/3 of the US workforce is unable to work remotely. So I know that people talk a lot about remote workers, but if you really start thinking about agriculture and manufacturing and healthcare, and I mean, there's just so many jobs that just cannot be done remotely. In the workforce, and I suspect that Kevin's team is one of those, one of those work groups. And I think about Christy in Public Works, the Eugene Public Works. I mean, you can't really like because parks is part of that too, the Public Works, right? I mean, they can't manage the parks from home. You can't. I mean, there's all of these things that really require you to be on site, and so that there is a difference. And my hope is that those that can work at home. Um, I don't like working from home, but so I'm hoping for us to open up so I can get back out there. But anyway, Thomas has his hand up.
Basically, I was just going to chime in with, even before the pandemic, this sometimes could be a problem that raises its head. Quite often, a lot of times when I was doing tough caring contracts and other work with SAIF, I encouraged either the president or managers to take time out of their schedule and come to the floor or come to the field with me, because it's in getting to know your leadership as a real person too, whether you're can do it remotely or not, that gives them the feeling that they also have your back. They're as committed as you are to their safety, and so it's invaluable, those extra times. I've even gotten the CEO of Lockheed Martin to visit the floor with me. So it can be done. You just got to help them understand the investment in their employees.
Mhm. Absolutely.
I want to go back to something you said earlier, Leigh, about learning groups. And I really appreciate that perspective, because I think that does one of the things you were talking about, which is empowers workers to be the experts and to help come up with the best solutions. And I think it also levels the playing field of power in a way where everybody's learning together and nobody's the I just said they're the expert, but then nobody's the expert. But I think the intent is that all the voices are valuable in the room. And I think those opportunities pop up in different ways for different people, but I really appreciate, especially now, being able to give workers voice to their work and help them come up with those good solutions that also bring some morale boost to them.
Mhm.
With that, I think we are just about out of time. In fact, I see a note from Michelle commenting she's got another meeting to go to. Appreciate your comments in the chat. Wanted to again thank Leigh for being willing to be our speaker this time. I really appreciated what you had to share, Leigh. I also appreciated the broader discussion from folks talking and writing things in the chat. We've got about another minute, but Leigh, do you have any closing comments that you wanted to share?
No, I just want to wish a wonderful holiday to everyone here. So hope you all have a wonderful one.
I would wish the same thing to our group, and we'll have more information coming out soon for our next meeting topic that Christy mentioned earlier. But thank you all so much for coming, and we'll look forward to seeing you again in the new year. And have a great rest of the day.
Love your holiday backdrop there.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's not really my house.
I know.
But yes, I wanted to have a cozy feeling. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you again for presenting, Leigh. It was great.
Thank you. You guys take care. I'll
You too.
take off. Bye.